It was a golden morning in Brightfield, a bustling city known for its vibrant energy and charm. In the heart of the city stood an enchanting daycare called Sunshine Academy. Its walls were painted in warm, cheerful colors, and the laughter of children echoed through its playful grounds. Parents spoke highly of the school, marveling at how their children became brighter, smarter, and happier after enrolling. Sunshine Academy was more than just a daycare. It was a symbol of hope and success. Among the teachers in the school was Miss Sara, a woman of true beauty and a voice so soothing that it could calm even the most restless child. Her eyes sparkled, and her warm smile reassured every parent who walked through the gates. She was adored by the children, trusted by parents, and celebrated as the soul of Sunshine Academy. But beneath her gentle demeanor, Miss Sara carried a secret so dark that it could shake the very foundation of the school. Tunde, a lively 3-year-old child with wide and curious eyes, loved going to school. He would sing the songs Miss Sara taught them at dinner table and talk endlessly about her stories. His mother, Ada, was a single parent who worked long hours at the market, and knowing Tunde was in Miss Sara's care gave her peace of mind. Like many others, she had complete faith in the school. But something began happening at the school. Parents whispered among themselves about children becoming unusually withdrawn or feeling mysteriously ill. The brightest students, the ones that were full of energy, seemed to become dull. Ada noticed that his son, Tunde, who was once a talkative, was becoming more reserved, and he was always talking about strange dreams, or a snake moving under his desk, or a cat sitting on Miss Sara's shoulder. Ada never took his words seriously. She said they were just a child's imagination. But every time Tunde spoke about those things, though she never took them seriously, there was always this worry on her face. In the heart of the school, there was a secret room. Miss Sara would open its door slowly and go inside when no one is looking. The air in the room was thick with the smell of burning herbs, and the walls were lined with symbols and charms. She would kneel down before an altar with a candle in front of her. "Another year of success," she whispered. Her voice was trembling. "I have given you what you asked. This school is still here because of me." Angel was one of the brightest children in Miss Sara's class. Her laughter could light up a room, and her questions challenged even the smartest adults. But one day, Angel came home and told her parents, "I saw a snake today. It was on Miss Sara's desk." Her mother laughed and brushed it off as a wild imagination. The next day, Angel whispered to her mother, "Miss Sara has a cat on her shoulder today. No one else saw it but me." Her father frowned. "That's enough, Angel. Don't be silly." But Angel saw more. She cried in the middle of the night, saying she dreamt of shadows dancing around her. Soon, she refused to go to school. There was this fear on her face each morning when it was time to go to school. She would beg her parents not to take her to school because there is a snake in her class. But her parents would drag her to school and hand her over to Miss Sara. Angel became very dull and moody with time. Her parents noticed and took her to the hospital many times to seek medical attention. But each time they went, the doctor would say, "Oh, there is nothing wrong with her." Angel told her mother about bad dreams she was having at night, and sometimes she would dream of Miss Sara chasing her with a snake. One time, in the middle of the night, Angel was lying alone in her room, and suddenly she saw a teddy bear moving around. It moved up and down in the room, and Angel saw Miss Sara's face in the process. She screamed so loud that her parents rushed to her room. Upon entering the room, they realized Angel was running temperature, and there was this fear on her face. Her mother asked what happened, but she couldn't talk. She only pointed at the teddy bear. The next morning, Angel managed to speak and told her parents what she saw, but her mother quickly shut her up. "No, Angel, We came to your room and we saw nothing like that. Besides, Miss Sara is a good woman. She gave you that teddy bear out of love, so it cannot harm you." At this point, Angel's father was becoming worried about his daughter's strange nightmares and stories. He told his wife, "I think we need to look into this matter well. This is very unusual of Angel. Maybe we should talk to our pastor about it." "Oh no, I don't think that is necessary," his wife replied. "Children behave funny sometimes. Maybe she has lost interest in the school. I think we should talk to her teacher. Probably let her stay with her for one weekend so that she gets used to her." The father agreed, and the next weekend, they took Angel to Miss Sara. "Let her be with you for this weekend. Once she gets used to you, coming to school wouldn't be a problem." Miss Sara smiled happily and took Angel inside her house. She cooked for her, gave her a warm bath, and took her to a room full of toys of different kind. "My dear, you can play with them, and once you are sleepy, that is your bed." Angel was quiet for the whole time, and there was this fear in her eyes whenever Miss Sara came closer to her. Miss Sara went into her room and was very excited. "Oh, this is good. Her parents brought her to me. They made the work so easy for me." That night, Angel did not have any sleep. She watched in fear as the toys in the room jumped up and down. Some turned into snakes, cats, and even some called her name. She saw a huge shadow on the wall with long fingers, and it was moving towards her. At this point, she could not scream or say any word. The words refused to come out. She was just lying in bed, as if her soul was out of her body. That night, the night was long for Angel. Meanwhile, Miss Sara was in her room, laughing strangely and so loud that Angel could hear it. "She is mine," Miss Sara said. Angel was hunted throughout the night, and when it was finally morning, Miss Sara rushed to her room. Angel was lying still with sweat all over her body, and her temperature was very high. Miss Sara quickly took her to her parents and told them to take her to the hospital for a proper checkup. The parents did, but for some days, Angel did not say anything to anyone. She would usually stay in the room, staring at the ceiling from morning till evening. Within weeks, Angel passed away from a mysterious illness. Her parents were devastated, but they were not the only ones mourning. Each year, a child seemed to vanish from the daycare, either from illness, accident, or unexplained disappearance. The parents started to notice the pattern. Ada began to put together Tunde's strange stories with the whispers she had heard from the market. One evening, she approached the school principal, Mr. Joseph. He was a kind aging man who had built Sunshine Academy with his life savings. When Ada shared her concerns, he waved them off. "Miss Sara is one of the best teachers we've had," Mr. Joseph said. "She has brought so much to this school. These are just coincidences." But Ada wasn't convinced. She decided to investigate on her own, and what she found left her trembling. Late at night, she saw Miss Sara leaving the school with something wrapped in a red cloth. She followed her to a forest on the outskirts of the city, where Miss Sara disappeared into the shadows. Ada's heart raced as she hid behind a tree, trying to make sense of what she had seen. She knew she couldn't confront Miss Sara alone, but who would believe her? Miss Sara had manipulated everyone, the principal, the parent, even the children. Ada decided to reach out to other parents, gathering all the evidence she could find. At this point, Miss Sara knew they were suspecting her. Her warm smile remained, but her eyes darkened as she carefully planned on how to defend herself. She invited parents for breakfast meetings, charming them with her kindness. She donated money to the school, gaining Mr. Joseph's unwavering support. And when she heard that parents were beginning to suspect her, she faked tears. "I have dedicated my life to these children. How could anyone think of such a terrible thing about me?" But the truth has a way of coming out no matter how deeply it is buried. One night, Ada and a group of parents decided to confront Miss Sara. They waited outside the school. Their hearts were pounding with a mix of fear and determination. What they discovered shocked them. The parents waited in silence near the school gate. Ada turned on a flashlight. Her hands were trembling. The night air was thick, and the only noise they could hear was the sound of leaves. As midnight approached, the school's door opened. Miss Sara came out. In her hands was the red cloth bundle, just as Ada had described. "That's her," one of the fathers whispered. His voice was trembling with both fear and anger. The group silently followed her, careful not to make any sound. Miss Sara walked with a purpose. She walked through the city and out into the thick forest. The parents looked at each other. They couldn't turn back now. In a clearing deep within the forest, Miss Sara stopped. She placed the bundle on the ground and began drawing strange symbols in the dirt with a stick. She started chanting, and the parents were terrified. Suddenly, a strong wind blew through the clearing. The red bundle shifted slightly as if something was inside. Ada couldn't take it anymore. She stepped forward and pointed her flashlight at her. "Miss Sara," she shouted, "what are you doing here?" Miss Sara froze and stopped chanting immediately. Slowly, she turned. Her usual warm smile replaced with a cold expression. "Ah, Ada," she said, "you shouldn't be here. None of you should." The other parents stepped into the clearing. One of the fathers, a man named Kwame, stepped forward. "We know something is wrong," he said. "The children, the sickness, the death. What have you been doing?" Miss Sara's smile widened, but it was no longer kind. It was as if she wanted to feed on them. "You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into," she said. "Everything I've done have been for the school, for your children, for their futures." "Futures?" Ada said. "Angel didn't have a future." "You wouldn't understand. This is bigger than you. All of you," Miss Sara said. Before anyone could react, the bundle in the red cloth unwrapped itself. It was a snake with gleaming red eyes. It moved towards Miss Sara, coiling around her feet as if it was protecting her. The parents moved back, but Ada held her ground. "What are you?" Ada said. "What is this?" Miss Sara laughed. "You think you are the first person to question me? The first to try to stop me? I serve something greater, something that has given this school everything it has. Fame, success, prosperity, and in return, I give it what it asks for." "What it asks for?" Kwame said. "You mean our children's lives?" Miss Sara didn't answer. Instead, she raised her arms, and there was a strong wind around them. The parents stepped back in terror as the ground beneath them began to tremble. The symbols Miss Sara had drawn began to glow faintly, and shadows danced around them like living creatures. "You should leave," she said. "Turn back now. I'll let you and your children leave. Stay and you will share their fate," Miss Sara warned. Ada's heart pounded, but she refused to go back. "We won't let you hurt another child," she said, stepping forward. "Whatever power you think you have, it ends tonight." Miss Sara's eyes narrowed. "Brave words," she said, "but bravery won't save you." Suddenly, the snake laughed at Ada. She screamed while pointing her flashlight. The light struck the snake's head and it coiled itself. The other parents rushed forward, shouting and waving their weapons. They were holding sticks, stones, and flashlights. Miss Sara became more angry. "You fools!" she shouted. "Do you think you can stop me? I've been doing this for years. The school owes its success to me." "Not anymore," Kwame said. He held Miss Sara to the ground, and the glowing symbols began to fade, and the wind died. The snake moved away into the shadows, and the clearing felt silent. The parents tied Miss Sara's hands with a rope and dragged her back to the city. They struggled. Her once beautiful face twisted in anger. "You don't know what you are doing," she said. "Without me, the school will crumble. Everything you've built will fall apart." "We will take that chance," Ada said. "The children's lives are worth more than your lies." The next day, the news of Miss Sara's arrest spread like wildfire. Parents gathered at the school, demanding answers. Mr. Joseph was shaking and pale. He stood before them, trying to calm down the crowd. "I didn't know," he said. "I swear I had no idea." But the damage was done. The once beloved sunshine was now a place of fear and suspicion. Parents pulled their children from the school, and the city buzzed with rumors of dark rituals and stolen lives. As for Miss Sara, she was taken to the authorities, but the story didn't end there. Ada and the other parents knew what they had witnessed was no ordinary crime. They had seen the power Miss Sara had, and they knew this wasn't over. Back at home, Ada hugged Tunde tightly, vowing to protect him at all costs. But deep down, she couldn't ignore the nagging thought that the darkness Miss Sara had brought into their life was still there, waiting for the next chance to strike. Miss Sara sat alone in a lit cell, her hands bound in iron cuffs. The once beaming smile that had won the trust of so many was now replaced with a cold, hard face. The air around her felt heavy, as if the darkness she carried within her refused to be contained by the walls. The prison guards whispered among themselves. Strange things had begun happening since Miss Sara arrived. Lights, shadows moved without explanation, and the faint sound of children echoed through the walls, even though there were no children in the cell. "Do you hear that?" one of the guards said. His partner nodded. "I don't like this," he said. "She's not just a teacher. There's something wrong with her." Inside the cell, Miss Sara closed her eyes and began to hum a soft, haunting melody. Meanwhile, in the city, Ada couldn't sleep. The events of the past week replayed in her mind, each memory more vivid than the last. She had done what she thought was right, but something about Miss Sara wasn't right. "Without me, the school will crumble. Everything you've built will fall apart." These words kept ringing in her mind. True to her warning, Sunshine Academy was in chaos. Parents had withdrawn their children. Mr. Joseph tried to solve what he could, but the community had turned against him. Ada visited him one afternoon with her son Tunde. The once proud principal looked like a shadow of himself. His hands were trembling as he sipped his tea. "I had no idea, Ada," he said. "She was so kind, so gentle. She brought life to this school. How could I have known what she was truly doing? How could I have known who she truly was?" Ada placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "None of us knew," she said. "But now we have to find out what to do next. The school may be falling apart, but our children still need us." That evening, Ada put Tunde to bed. He whispered something that sent a chill down her spine. "Mommy," he said, "Miss Sara is in my dreams. She says she's coming back." Ada froze. Her heart was pounding. "What do you mean, Tunde?" "She's in a dark place," he continued, his eyes wide and frightened. "She's calling me and the other kids. She says she's not finished." In the cell, Miss Sara's humming grew louder. The guards outside felt an overwhelming urge to leave, as if something unseen was pushing them away. One guard finally broke, throwing down his keys and running out of the building. "I'm not staying here," he shouted. "Not with her." The remaining guards hesitated, looking at each other. Miss Sara managed to escape the cell. She didn't need the keys. She left without anyone noticing. The next morning, Ada gathered a few parents who confronted Miss Sara. They met at Kwame's house. Something is not right, Ada began. Tunde says she's in his dreams, calling for him. I've heard other parents say their kids are having nightmares too. It's like she's still reaching for them. Kwame shouted, we need to find out more. What was she doing in that forest? What kind of power did she have? An elderly woman in the corner, Mama Eka, cleared her throat. She had been one of the first parents to suspect something was wrong at the school. I've heard stories, she said. Stories about people who steal the stars of children. They take their brightness, their future, to gain power and wealth. It's an old dark practice. The group listened attentively. These people serve something ancient. It's not just about the children they sacrifice. They also bind themselves to the spirits that give them power. If what Ada saw in the forest was true, then Miss Sara isn't just a woman. She's tied to something very strong. That night, Ada sat by Tunde beside his bed, watching him sleep. She felt a heavy weight on her chest, a fear that they haven't truly or completely stopped Miss Sara. The woman may have been locked, but her influence was still around. And if what Mama Eka said was true, then stopping her would take more than just courage. It would take something Ada wasn't sure she had. In her restless sleep, Ada dreamt of the forest. She saw the glowing symbols Miss Sara had drawn. She heard the low hiss of the snake, and she felt the presence of something watching over her. When she woke up, she knew what she had to do. We have to go back to the forest, she told the group the next day. There's something there, something left behind. They returned to the forest under the cover of darkness, armed with flashlights, and the desperate hope that they could put an end to the darkness once and for all. The forest was quiet. The symbols Miss Sara had drawn were still visible on the ground. As the group began to dig around the area, Ada's flashlight caught something. She knelt down and uncovered a small curved idol. Its eyes seemed to glow faintly, and the air around it felt cooler. What is that? Kwame asked. His voice was shaking. It's her connection, Mama Eka said. Her power comes from this. If we destroy it, we might break her hold. But as they prepared to smash the idol, a voice echoed through the forest. You shouldn't have come here. They turned back to see Miss Sara standing at the edge of the forest. They were shocked. This is the beginning, she said. Her voice was cold and filled with certainty. You can't stop what's coming. Miss Sara stepped into the clearing. Her presence made everyone freeze. The group exchanged terrified looks, and their confidence was disappearing. She should have been locked away in her cell, yet she was still standing before them, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. How did you escape? Kwame asked with so much fear in his voice. Miss Sara smiled. You still don't understand, do you? Locks and walls means nothing to me. I am bound to something far greater than this world. What you've seen is just a little of my power. Ada lifted the idol. If this is your power, we will destroy it, she said. Miss Sara's smile vanished. For a brief moment, there was fear in her eyes. You think it's that simple? Go ahead and break it, then see what happens. The group paused, unsure whether destroying the idol would save them or destroy them. Mama Eka, who had been silently observing, stepped forward and placed a hand on Ada's shoulder. She's trying to scare you. That idol is the key to her power. Without it, she is nothing. Miss Sara let out a loud laugh. You are playing with forces you can't understand, old woman. If you destroy that idol, that will be your end. Do you really want to bring that upon yourself or your children? Ada's mind raced. Could they risk it? She thought of Tunde and the other children, their bright futures stolen by this woman's darkness. She thought of Angel and the tears of her grieving parents. Whatever the cost, this had to end. Without another word, Ada raised the idol above her head and brought it, crushing it on the rug. The idol broke into countless pieces. The ground beneath them trembled violently, and the air grew extra cold. Miss Sara let out a piercing scream. Her glowing eyes dimmed, and she fell to her knees. The forest became very silent. Kwame and the others stood there, frozen. Mama Eka knelt beside Miss Sara, who was now weak and trembling. Her once commanding presence reduced to nothing. "It's over," she said. "You have no power left." Miss Sara gave out a faint smile, though her eyes were filled with anger. "You think you've won?" she said. "You've destroyed the idol, but the one I serve is eternal. That is far from over." Before anyone could respond, Miss Sara collapsed and went silent. For a moment, no one moved, unsure whether she was truly gone or merely playing another of her tricks. Ada turned to the others. "We need to leave now." They didn't need to be told twice. The group quickly gathered their belongings and made their way out of the forest, leaving behind Miss Sara's lifeless body. As they reached the edge of the woods, the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, bathing the city in a golden glow. For the first time in weeks, Ada felt a sense of relief. They had faced the darkness and won, at least for now. But the victory was short-lived. Over the next weeks, strange things began happening around the city. Children who were once in Miss Sara's class reported nightmares of shadowy figures calling their names. The school's building, now abandoned, became a source of fear for the community. Those who passed by swore they could hear faint whispers and laughter coming from within. Ada too felt the lingering presence of something in her house. Tunde continued to speak of dreams where Miss Sara appeared, warning him that her work was not finished. Each time, Ada reassured him, but deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that Miss Sara's warning had been more than just empty words. One evening, Ada sat with Mama Eka, seeking her wisdom. "Is it really over?" she asked. "Have we truly stopped her?" Mama Eka shook her head slowly. "Darkness like that doesn't vanish so easily. The spirit she served is still out there, searching for a new vessel." Ada's heart sank. "What do we do?" Mama Eka looked at her with solemn eyes. "We prepare. The battle isn't over." As the days turned into weeks, whispers of strange happenings spread throughout Brightfield. Children in other schools began exhibiting the same symptoms: withdrawn behavior, sudden illness, and mysterious visions. The community was gripped by fear, and Ada knew they were far from safe. But she was determined to fight. Whatever it took, she would protect Tunde and the other children. Miss Sara's reign of terror may have ended, but the shadow she had unleashed still moved around them, waiting for its chance to strike again. Ada couldn't shake the feeling that the battle was far from over. She could see it in Tunde's restless nights, in the strange whispers that seemed to follow her whenever she walked past the abandoned school. The city itself felt different, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. One evening, Mama Eka visited Ada. She carried a small ladder pouch filled with herbs, charms, and a single curved stone. "This is for protection," Mama Eka said. "Keep it with you and Tunde at all times. The spirit that Miss Sara served is searching for a new vessel, and it will stop at nothing to gain its power." Ada accepted the pouch with trembling hands. "How do we stop it?" "The spirit strives on fear and innocence," she replied. "It preys on the brightest children because their stars shine the strongest." "How do we stop it?" Ada asked. "There's an ancient ritual," Mama Eka explained. "It requires courage, unity, and a pure heart, but it must be performed in the place where the spirit was last summoned, the forest clearing." "I'll do whatever it takes," Ada said. The parents who had once stood with Ada in the forest returned to her side, Together, they gathered supplies for the rituals: candles, sacred herbs, and the items belonging to the children who had been affected. The night they chose for the ritual was the new moon, and when the sky would be at its darkest. As they prepared, strange events escalated across the city. More children began seeing shadows and speaking of nightmares. At the abandoned school, people reported hearing faint cries at night. The city was gripped with fear, and Ada knew that they had no time to waste. On the night of the ritual, Ada, Mama Eka, and the other parents gathered in the forest. The air was thick with tension. They formed a circle around the spot where the idol had been destroyed, lighting candles and sprinkling the sacred herbs on the ground. Mama Eka led the group in chanting an ancient prayer. Her voice was steady and strong. The air grew colder with each word. Shadows began to swirl around them, and Ada felt a crushing weight settle on her chest. "It's here," Mama Eka said. Her voice was trembling. "Whatever happens, don't break the circle." The shadows turned into a towering figure. It was moving like smoke. Its eyes burned with an unnatural light, and its voice boomed through the clearing. "You dare destroy me," the spirit said. "You are nothing. You cannot banish me." Ada stepped forward, holding Tunde's photo in her hand. Her voice shook, but she stood firm. "You have taken enough from us. You have no power here anymore." The spirit laughed, a sound that sent chills down everyone's spine. "Fools! I will not be stopped by your feeble prayers." But Mama Eka raised the carved stone from her pouch and began chanting louder. The parents joined her, their voices growing stronger with each word. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and the spirit moved towards Ada. But when it got to her, the carved stone glowed brightly, and the blinding light erupted from the circle. The spirit cried out so loudly, the forest fell silent. The parents collapsed to the ground. They were tired but relieved. Mama Eka smiled faintly. Her hands were trembling as she stuck the carved stone back into her pouch. "It's done," she said. "The spirit is gone." Ada let out a shaky breath, tears streaming down her face. She thought of Angel, of the children who had suffered, and of Tunde who could finally sleep peacefully. In the weeks that followed, the city slowly began to heal. Sunshine Academy was demolished. Its land turned into a community park where children could play freely. Ada became a pillar of the community. Tunde returned to his bright, curious self. His nightmares faded away. Ada would often watch him play, her heart swelling with gratitude. They had faced the darkness and won, not just for themselves, but for every child who deserved a chance to shine. As the sun set in the city, Ada sat with Tunde in the park, watching the children laugh and play. The shadows that haunted them were gone, replaced by the warm glow of hope. For the first time in a long time, Ada felt at peace. The battle was over and light had won. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, please do well to like, share, and leave us a comment. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on your notification bell for more captivating stories like this. The parents collapsed to the ground. They were tired but relieved. Mama Eka smiled faintly. Her hands were trembling as she stuck the carved stone back into her pouch. "It's done," she said. "The spirit is gone." Ada let out a shaky breath, tears streaming down her face. She thought of Angel, of the children who had suffered, and of Tunde who could finally sleep peacefully. In the weeks that followed, the city slowly began to heal. Sunshine Academy was demolished. Its land turned into a community park where children could play freely. Ada became a pillar of the community. Her bravely,